What up? Thank you for tuning into the MMA podcast number 166 this April 13th, 2016. A lot to talk about this past weekend. The UFC made its first trip to Croatia, UFC Zagreb. We'll talk about Rothwell Dos Santos. We'll talk about Derek Lewis versus Gabe Gonzaga and the rest of the card. BJ Penn's return is official. He's going to fight Dennis Seaver at UFC 199. Going to talk about some fight announcements. We're going to talk about this coming weekend. Askren fighting in 1FC, that UFC Tampa card, come this Saturday. Thanks for tuning in. Let's do it, people.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast.
The MMA Podcast 166. Thank you for tuning in. A big night in sports, a big night in non-MMA sports. We got the first night of NHL playoffs. We got, just in about 5 minutes here, the Warriors going for 73 wins. Kobe's final game ever. It's a big night of sportsing. And thank you for listening to this MMA podcast, whether you're listening live on Ustream this fine Wednesday night, or you're listening to it archived on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get it. I am joined, as always, by Project Pat, a.k.a. P Money. He's on Twitter, at Sweet Pappy Jones. What's going on, dude?
Big Jake, you were quite right. We do have a big sportsing evening.
Also, and you're in LA. I bet they're going nuts over Kobe.
Oh my goodness, yeah, no, that's for real. It's a legit thing out here. I might be the only person who's also considering Dodgers opening night game 9 of 162 to be a big thing.
There you go.
I mean, hey, why not? There's so much going on, and we actually have some UFC / mixed martial arts action to break down. For once, usually, or well, not usually, the last couple of weeks, we've been a little bereft of mixed martial arts cards, and really not a whole lot besides fight announcements. But we've actually got some results to break down and a card to look forward to, Jake. It's an amazing time.
Yeah, I believe this Croatia card, UFC Zagreb, Rothwell Dos Santos, I think it was like 3 weeks since the card before it. That UFC Fight Night Hunt vs. Mir card, which we've since found out that Frank Mir tested hot. We will talk about that a little later. Before we get into this UFC Croatia card, I have to ask very quickly, as an LA resident, you probably know a little bit more about Los Lakers and Kobe Bryant than most. Where do you rank him all time as best Lakers ever? I'm probably in the minority here. A lot of Wilt fans, a lot of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar fans, a lot of Magic Johnson fans, a lot of Shaq fans. I think Kobe's the best Laker ever. I mean, just the way just the fire and the obsession this guy had with the game. I mean, it's wild. He was truly a generational player, and it was very fun watching him growing up. Just as if you're a mainstream sports fan, whether you're 20 years old or 60, you appreciated you some Kobe Bryant. Where do you rank him as far as best Lakers ever, while all of our pure MMA listeners are pulling their hair out?
Well, I'll make it brief. I really would, as far as best Laker, where he would rank as like the top Laker of all time, I'd probably have to put him number 2 or number 3. I mean, Wilt the Stilt, Jerry West, specifically Wilt the Stilt. I mean, he was just way ahead of his time. Guys weren't built like Wilt the Stilt back in the day, at least not as predominantly. You look at the NBA and what it is now. There's every guy on the team is 6'10", seemingly, or Kobe Bryant seems like an average size height guy in the NBA. Kobe Bryant's like 6'6", at least, and he looks like a medium sized guy on the court. But still, he's just been one of the most prolific scorers. He's led the Lakers to 5 championships, was able to get over that post Shaq hump and get a couple more there. Probably should have earned more. Still real salty at Dwight Howard. But anyways, I'd have to put him maybe just behind Kareem and Magic. Possibly, I don't know if in necessarily that order, but I think those are my top 3. But I think Kobe would probably be in the number 3 spot.
I could see you arguing Wilt over him, Magic over him, Kobe over him. Kobe, guess how many MVPs Kobe won? NBA MVP awards.
Oh, wow, you're stumping me right here. I want to say none.
Dude only won it once. LeBron's already up to 4.
Oh, wow.
Kobe only won the award one time, sort of going from the Jordan era, which lasted through the 90s, to the LeBron era. Tim Duncan and Steve Nash both won multiple MVPs, but never Kobe Bryant. And that's all the basketball we're doing for this show. I'm very sorry. I know a lot of MMA fans are very centric to mixed martial arts and don't follow anything else, and we just lost half of our listeners. But hey, a little bit of Kobe talk to spicing it up. But let's get back to what the MMA podcast is about. MMA. Also, very quickly, if you are listening live, of course, you can call in 213-457-3380 or Skype us at the MMA Podcast. Visit themmapodcast.com and click the links at the top to subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube, all for free.
Free 99.
The low. All right. Also, of course, follow the MMA Podcast on Twitter. Let's get to UFC Zagreb. Let's sort of break it down like we previewed it, which I think is an appropriate way to go about it because it was such a shallow card. We can literally talk about the entire card, top to bottom, except the main and co-main events. We'll talk about each of those fight by fight. But what stood out for you? I love seeing Zach Cummings getting a pretty one-sided unanimous decision win against Nicholas Dalby on the prelim card main event. Aside from that, a lot of people I'd never seen before. The favorites, Jan Blachowicz and Marina Moroz, who I have seen before, both won via pretty one-sided decision. Lucas Martins wins a split decision over Robert Whiteford. And the rest of the fights were fights. Also Mirbak Taisumov won. The rest of the fights were between people I'd never heard of before in my life. What did you think of this card? Which it's a shame they never did a UFC card in Croatia before Cro Cop retired. I would think that they would have done that at least once. I'm sure a ton of Croatians would have loved to come out and see Mirko fight. But this their first trip down to Zagreb, or down to the country of, or up to, I don't know where the fuck it is, Croatia, Europe somewhere, the Eurasia area. I don't know where Croatia is, dog.
That's Eastern Europe.
What did you make of these Croatian fights that took place on a Sunday afternoon for us? Another sort of oddity.
Oh, man. Well, speak for yourself over there, Mr. Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah.
The Fight Pass prelims were kicking off for your boy at 7:30 in the a.m. that Sunday. You can rest assured I did not watch those live.
Hell no.
Hell to the no. I watched the main card live. I went back and watched everything else. It was a decent card, I thought, overall. Did have some slow points for sure. What card doesn't? But again, this was one of those, not the biggest names, but there was some decent action. Jared Cannonier, man, I felt bad for what he did to Cyril Asker. I thought that fight probably could have been stopped before it went to the elbows on the ground after he just dropped him with this gigantic left hand. And then this elbow that the ref probably should have stopped the fight anyways, just sliced Homeboy open, something savage. I'm like, oh, that's going to leave a scar for life. Homeboy was probably unconscious, so he probably didn't even feel it anyways, but he will probably be pissed when he realizes what happened. Yeah, Lucas Martins versus Robert Whiteford. That was a closer fight than I thought that would be. I thought my boy Martins was going to get the KO in that, but Whiteford was looking really solid. Man, I don't know. Also, Taisumov, Maribek Taisumov, looking very good with his TKO over his opponent, Damir Hadzovic. I'm sure I butchered that, but man, Maribek just putting it on people with this uppercut that he dropped Damir with. Just something brutal. He is a tactician. He was on Damir early and often, gets the first round TKO. Great showing there. And yeah, I'm also with you. I like seeing Zach Cummins getting back into the win column. Huge welterweight and has a good skill set too. I mean, he was giving Gunnar Nelson everything he could handle. He was handling Gunnar Nelson on the feet before he succumbed to, I want to say it was a rear naked choke. Just somehow Gunnar Nelson got in there and sunk in that rear naked choke. But he does have solid all-around karate style striking, some decent grappling chops as well. So glad to see him get back in there. And I don't know, the ladies fight, it was pretty good, but as far as the Jan Blachowicz versus Igor Pekrajic, I found that one somewhat lackluster. I want to say that Twitter was going nuts over that fight, but I was not feeling it myself. Seeing European wrestling match, I mean, there was some striking in between. I don't know. It was a decent fight. That was a back and forth fight. I guess I can give it up for that one. Yeah, other than that, I mean, Francis Ngannou, TKO and Curtis Blades to hell. That was, no. Actually, I want to say that was he TKO'd his eye to hell, if I recall correctly. He swole that eye shut so bad. He was like trying to feel the doctor's fingers to see how many.
Doc stoppage. Yeah.
Yeah, that was. Oh my goodness, that was a good call. I will rarely ever argue with a doctor or referee erring on the side of fighter safety, and that was 100% the right call. If that dude were to tell me he could see out of that eye, I would tell him he's full of shit, because I was just completely swollen shut. Ngannou, he was looking pretty dang good, looking pretty beastly there. So yeah, pretty good card, pretty good card for the most part. It had some decent action.
Really quick, I want to ask you, are you in a bird estuary of some sort?
Oh yes. Actually, I'm a member of the Audubon Society. I frequent long walks in bird watching. For our 0 female fans that are listening, just heads up.
Hell yeah.
I'm into those kind of things. It's dusk, very lovely situation over here.
Yo, Ramsey says the word on the street. We got the bird on the street. That's right. Moving right along, Derek Lewis and Gabe Gonzaga. I think we both kind of called this one. Derek Lewis just is on a very positive trajectory right now. Not only on a 3-fight win streak, but all TKOs, the last 2 coming in the first round. Dude looks dangerous, and he looked extra dangerous in Zagreb. 12 seconds left in the first round, finishing the fight via KO. Gabe Gonzaga going out. Derek Lewis apparently wants to fight Roy Nelson at UFC 200, and I wholly support that fight. I want to see him fight a top heavyweight next, because I mean this dude really could be the real deal. He's 31. He's 6'3", a 79-inch reach. I would love to see this guy crack into the top 10 at heavyweight.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And you have to love the moxie of someone who's also willing to call out John Jones. Of course, John Jones has, at least for the late notice fight for UFC 197, he was saying, "Hey, light heavyweight, heavyweight," and Derek Lewis had been saying for a while now, "Hey, if Jones wants to come up to heavyweight, I'll be the guy to test him." And still to this day, I really don't think there are a ton of guys that are out there campaigning for that John Jones fight that really, really want to get in there and do the thing with John Jones. So I give him props for that. And yeah, you're right. He has certainly been doing big things in the heavyweight division as of late. Good statement win over Gonzaga too. I mean, Gonzaga himself is not a small guy. He's a very big heavyweight, former heavyweight champion, and he has a great grappling base. He's got strong punches, and certainly would be a guy that you would think, with his grappling prowess, that's a guy that could give Derek Lewis some trouble. But Lewis, just that whole fight, he was very composed and just ended up crushing Gonzaga with some big punches, put him out like it was just nothing. Yeah, fantastic performance. He's certainly climbing up and making his presence known in the cage and on the mic these days.
Yeah, the Black Beast doing work in Croatia. That brings us to the main event, which, dude, I thought this was going to be a closer fight than it was. I thought both of these guys would have their moments. Both would be rocked. I mean, Junior looked very vulnerable in his fight against Stipe. Rothwell, through his career, has had a lot of moments of vulnerability. Man, Junior fucking put it to Ben Rothwell in a fight. We've seen a few of these now with Junior. We saw him batter the hell out of Roy Nelson, saw him batter the hell out of Shane Carwin, saw him batter the hell out of Hunt before he spinning hook kicked him to death. Just one-sided, just absolutely beat the living daylights out of Rothwell, who, credit to Big Ben for staying in it for 25 minutes. I think he ended the third or fourth round, Junior did, with a punch and a spinning, body kick that left Ben, flying backwards across the cage, landing on his ass. Just a very, very one-sided decision for Junior. As far as where that leaves him, he's now fourth in the weight class behind Alistair Overeem, Stipe Miocic, and Kane. Man, if Overeem can beat Andrei Arlovsky in this upcoming fight, you've got to say that Overeem may be next in line. Kane and Travis Brown, the winner of that, will be up there too. I mean, shit, we might see a Kane Jr. quadrilogy fight for a title shot. I don't know. But as far as where this moves either guy, this throws Junior right up where he's been his entire career, which is top 3 or 4 of the weight class. Stipe will get his shot next, and then after Stipe, you have 3 different fighters that could throw their hat in. The winner of Overeem Arlovsky, the winner of Kane Brown, and now Junior Dos Santos, with a one-sided, just mollywhopping of a fight against Ben Rothwell.
Yeah, it was a fantastic, one of the better performances we've probably ever seen. You mentioned some of the classic JDS beatdowns over Carwin specifically, which was just a gruesome, man. He left Carwin a mess. I think that it, actually, if I'm not mistaken, that is the fight that retired Shane Carwin. That was just a savage beatdown. I think Junior looked even better in this fight. And you know what? A lot of people were popping off saying, "Oh, you know what? They're over there in Croatia. Who knows what kind of athletic commission is overseeing this? UFC is probably in charge." A lot of those PED mumblings going about. And I mean, of course, body type is not always necessarily an indicator. We've seen it before. People testing hot that you're like, what? That person's testing hot. They didn't even look super ripped or anything like that. But I did not think Junior looked the most ripped of his career or anything like that. And I'm not one of those people that's gonna hop on that train and even make any kind of allegation like that. But I think maybe he's just finally been getting his training down, because that endurance was really up. His movement seemed just better than it ever had been. His movement, his endurance all seemed top notch, and it wasn't like it was just striking either. He was having to shuck off Big Ben and some takedown attempts early on in the fight. Not so much later on, but there were those exchanges, and Junior just handled it all fantastically, showing off that crisp striking, that just fantastic boxing game that brought him the UFC championship, and what was it, his first 7 or 8 fights in the UFC, just knocking everybody out, ascending to the championship level. He just really seemed to be on point, and I must say I went 10-3 on my picks on this card, and I apologize to the fans for not sharing my picks. Sometimes I don't formulate these things until the Friday weigh-ins or the day before weigh-ins, so sometimes it's too far out to really project, to get the crystal ball going. But went 10-3 on my picks of this card, and this is one of the ones I got wrong. I went with Big Ben and his forward momentum. Did the MMA math, and I was completely wrong on this one. I'm kind of ashamed of myself / embarrassed for that being one of the ones that I got wrong. But Junior just showing you can't count him out. A lot of people were saying coming into this, Junior's just looking shot. And I myself certainly thought he was not shot, but looking more on the downward trajectory of his career. And with this performance, he just really showed, hey, maybe not. Maybe that stock is starting to rise once more. I mean, it certainly is taking away the hype and momentum from Big Ben with a solid 50-45 beatdown on Sunday.
Yeah, and I feel like we have a lot of these matchups where it's two guys, and if you only look at the last year, then man, fighter A looks a lot better than fighter B. B's lost their last 1 or 2 fights. A has not only won their last few fights, but won it dominantly. I'm liking fighter A. But then if you take the last year out of the equation and look at their, the last 10 years, you say, oh, fighter B is way fucking better. I feel like in more cases than not, what's going to be an outlier is the last year, because you only fight, 2 or 3 times in a year. And I'm going to start to try and keep track in the back of my head who wins more of these fights. The fighter who's historically better, or the fighter who's had the, better last 12 months. Because here, Rothwell was for sure on the upswing. Dos Santos was on the downswing. But you look at their careers, and Dos Santos has not only been fighting stiffer competition, he's, been a champion. He's, fought tremendous opponents. So, Junior just absolutely dominating Rothwell here. And I believe, unless you have anything else, that does it for UFC Croatia. Let's get to the news. It's official. We're gonna see BJ Penn fight again. We thought he was retired before the 3rd Frankie Edgar fight. He came back to fight Frankie Edgar, and he's coming back again to fight Dennis Siver in what seems like a much more winnable fight at UFC 199. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, Penn is one of my, if not my favorite fighter of all time. I'm for sure stoked to see him back. I'm more stoked than I was at the Frankie news, because, I thought Frankie, oh man, Frankie might smash him. Here I feel a little bit more confident for Penn. Seaver isn't a spring chicken himself, and stylistically I think this matches up decently for Penn. I'm calling a second round sub. Who you got in this one, P Money? And what are your thoughts, of course, on the official return of Baby J, the Prodigy?
Well, BJ Penn, he's certainly going about it the right way. At least I would think so. He got with Jackson's MMA, one of the biggest camps out there, some of the best talent out there. Kind of reminds me of a Matt Hughes move if you think about it. Matt Hughes started training with BJ Penn, working on that striking later on in his career, in the twilight of his career. And that really helped Matt Hughes in his last few fights up until, oh God, I want to say ironically enough, the third fight with BJ Penn, where BJ starched him in like 20 seconds or something like that. It was just a little case of just too little too late. And with BJ Penn, of course, he's always had the skills and everywhere it goes. Heavy hands, great technical boxing, great jiu-jitsu. He really has the whole package. The takedown defense. Frankie Edgar, he's really the only person just with his timing who was ever really able to seat Penn. And even then, not for very long. However, I think that BJ, he can come back and he can perhaps perform well for a few fights, but I don't know if this is the right move. Who knows? Maybe he'll prove me wrong and he'll beat Conor McGregor, or who knows? Maybe he'll be able to come back and get his first win over Frankie Edgar and somehow become a 3-division champion. I just think it's just a little too late. I mean, he's fought everybody in the UFC. He's had the 2 belts. I don't know what there is to come back for. I know he's got to be working with the UFC. He comes for money anyways. Can't necessarily be a financial situation. He probably is one of the few fighters to have made money in his UFC tenure anyways. But if it's something he wants to do, I mean, that's one of those things. A quote unquote motivated BJ Penn is like a sea-level Kane. They're very scary beasts. I just wonder at this point if motivated BJ Penn really exists. I mean, his move to Jackson's MMA, that's a huge step. I don't know that. I mean, he's been out there in Hawaii for a while. I mean, of course, he trained with Nova Uniao back in the day. He's been with other camps, but it seems like this is the first time he's really branching out and getting in there with some high level competition. Anyways, I've just been rambling about BJ Penn. I think Seaver, though, I mean, they're similar in size. Seaver has excellent striking all the way around. More into the kicks. He's got more the Taekwondo style. So he's given BJ Penn a lot more to think about in this fight. And I can't really recall the last fighter that BJ Penn has taken on that really has a kicking game like Dennis Seaver. Of course, with BJ Penn's ground acumen, who knows if winging kicks is really the thing he's going to want to do against BJ Penn, lest he give up the opportunity for a takedown, and you don't really want to roll with BJ Penn. But man, I really feel like this is a good fight. This isn't a complete mismatch, but I'm going to go a similar route as you, Jake. But I think BJ Penn is going to win this one by TKO in the first.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
There it is. BJ, he's been working with Jackson's. They're the master game planners, and I think it's going to shine. I think it's going to shine, at least in this outing for him.
And I'm sure that paycheck will be quite large. And yeah, you make a good point. I don't think it's probably very unlikely to say that he'll win another championship. What he's coming back for exactly, who knows? Maybe he just wants to go out on a win. Maybe he really thinks he can challenge, the top 45ers. I would love to see him make a run. And people want to call him a bum for losing to Frankie. It's like, who hasn't Frankie beat the shit out of? Who he's fought recently? Beat the shit out of Cub. He beat the shit out of Chad. He beat the shit out of Penn. Like, I don't know if we can necessarily call someone a bum because Frankie Edgar handed them their lunch. I mean, Frankie just did that to Uriah Faber, who's about to fight for the title. So let's not be too quick to call Pin a bum. I think he absolutely smashes Seaver. And this is a fight that's just around the corner, June 4th. Ooh, I'm starting to get pumped for that. Another fight at UFC 199, Clay Guida and Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega, a spotless record, if you don't count the drug test where he tested positive for drostanolone against Mike De La Torre, a fight he originally won via rear naked choke. And Clay Guida, who I almost wanted to say, man, we haven't seen him fight in a couple of years, have we? And then I looked and I was like, no, he fought twice in 2015. He fought in April. He beat Robbie Peralta via unanimous decision. And against Thiago Tavares last November, he lost via a first-round guillotine choke to Thiago Tavares. One of these guys who seemingly perpetually has been on a win-lose streak all the way back to 2011, spanning 7 fights. So he should win this one if he keeps with that current pattern, but he is fighting Brian Ortega, a guy who, man, he's very tough. He's never lost a fight. He trains at a black house in Torrance. I'm sure you'll get to it, but funny how his nickname's T City and he popped hot. But yeah, he's very young. I think he's only 25. So we'll see now a grizzled vet, the 34-year-old Clay Guida, fighting Brian T City Ortega.
Yeah, the true perennial gatekeeper versus the up-and-coming prospect, as God intended it to be. Clay Guida has just been gatekeeping at 155 and now at 145 for the better part of 8 or 9 years now. I think
the only guy. I think the only guy who can say he's beat the last two lightweight champs. Rafael Dos Anjos and Anthony Pettis. He beat them both in 2010 and 2011. Then things sort of went south after that Pettis win.
Yeah, he did have a little hot streak going. I want to say when he first moved to Jackson's MMA, I want to say he did, or maybe he's still currently training there, but I want to say when he first moved there, he did have a good little streak going there. I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 fight win streak, but then it was just back to the alternating wins and losses. And this is really a litmus test for Brian Ortega more than anything. Clay Guida, we've already established he's top 15 in his division, maybe top 10. I mean, his move to featherweight really just hasn't done him any favors. He just has the most awkward style. He's almost like a 145-pound Ben Rothwell, just bouncing, except just on a ton of Adderall or something like that, just bouncing around everywhere, hair flailing, not really the most orthodox in anything he does. And this is just going to be, like I said, a litmus test to see where Brian Ortega is at in his career. Does he have the skills to take out Clay Guida? Again, Clay Guida, I mean, you got to catch him, first of all. Oh my goodness. That's why it's like, it feels like we haven't seen him in years. It's because we block out his fights. Because as of late, they've just gotten so boring. Ever since the Gray Maynard fight on FX, one of the worst fights in mixed martial arts history, the Gray Maynard Clay Guida fight. It's just, that's what you find yourself doing when he fights. You just kind of block it out. You use that as the piss break or something like that, because really the only time when it's exciting is when he's getting finished. And you mentioned last time that he actually, I believe he is the only fighter to hold a victory over Dos Anjos as well as Pettis. However, I think the last time he had an exciting fight was when he broke Dos Anjos' jaw. And aside from that, I can't recall that many more exciting finishes from Clay Guida. So that may be why it seems like we haven't seen him in forever. It's just, he is an endearing guy. He seems like a good guy. I feel like it'd be badass to hang out with Clay Guida. But, man, sometimes in the case, it's just not the most fan-friendly style.
this is Brian O'Reilly's fight to lose, really, and I do think get this one done at UFC 199.
And Pat, between right now and the next time you talk, I'm going to call you on your phone line because your connection was getting a little bit fuzzy there. Let me go ahead and ring him up right quick. But, Brian Ortega and Clay Guida, BJ Penn versus Dennis Seaver, both of those fights will be featherweight fights, actually. So Penn's return, he's fought at lightweight, featherweight, and welter, but Penn's return, and he fought Lyoto Machida at 205, but Penn's return, like Guida Ortega, will be at featherweight. Moving on, another fight announcement. Kat Zingano going to be fighting Juliana Pena, UFC 200. I like this fight a lot. The up-and-coming tough winner Pena fighting Kat Zingano, who has not fought in a while. I believe, when was her last fight? She fought, I'm completely blanking on her opponent's name. Do you remember who she beat, P-Money?
Oh, let me double check here.
I'm looking. Wow, she has not fought since Ronda Rousey. Damn. I thought she for sure had taken a fight since that L. But no, her last 3 fights, she TKO'd Miesha Tate and Amanda Nunes, the 2 fighters who will be fighting for the next women's bantamweight championship, and then lost to Rousey. So she's making her return in over a year. Going to be fighting Juliana Pena. I think this is Kat's fight to lose. She has a lot more experience. I feel like, she has a lot more tools on that tool belt. Pena's, got the cardio, got some, decent. She's serviceable wherever the fight goes, but Kat has just proven to be such a nasty striker. I think she'll have the tools to not let Pena dominate the ground game, and if it's standing up, just absolutely tear her apart with that Muay Thai.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think Kat Zingano, she's just a much more technical fighter. Juliana Pena, I've not grown to be such a big fan of her, so all the news reports coming out lately, and just seems quite ratchet, really. Just a ratchet that loves to fight and got into the MMA game. And Kat Zingano, I think she's going to go out there. She's going to tune her up. She's going to come out with that fire in her belly, and she's going to put some of that technical Muay Thai on her. She's got a good wrestling background as well, so she can grapple you up. We certainly saw her hold her own very well against Miesha Tate, better than most girls do. She has a TKO victory over the current UFC women's bantamweight champion. I think Kat really, this is her fight right here, and I think she's gonna put on a good show.
Ooh, and your boy Kobe just killed it. Oh, he killed it with another 3. Kobe Bryant going absolutely crazy. I think he's got 14 points in the first quarter here. We'll wrap it up so you'll be able to watch it. But that brings us actually really quick. I wanted to talk about Miesha Tate turning down a fight against Holly Holm to fight Amanda Nunes. Do you think Holm is snubbed here? Do you think she deserved the shot over Amanda Nunes?
Oh man, that's a tricky one. Amanda Nunes has been in the hunt. She's certainly been a worthy contender for the title for a minute here. I wouldn't say snubbed. I think that probably would have sold better for UFC 200 realistically, which is one reason I'm surprised that they're not doing that fight. I just think that Holly kind of, of course she had that shine taking the O away from Ronda Rousey and taking the championship from her. So there was a lot of intrigue on her, and she was doing very well in that fight up until that final round where she got caught and got submitted. So I certainly think there's a couple reasons you could make the rematch, but hey, Miesha Tate won fair and square. Amanda Nunes is a legit threat to really any woman at the UFC bantamweight division. She is a beast.
great striking. Seems like a very powerful striker. Seems like she has a really solid ground game. So good everywhere she goes. Very intense. I like her, and I certainly can't be too mad at her. Again, I don't know that it's a snub at Holly per se. It is an interesting decision, though. It kind of makes you wonder what kind of machinations they have lined up down the road here.
I figured the UFC would make the rematch, but only because the UFC has seemingly been so rematch happy, like the last year. Like did Holm deserve it? Hell no. There is no way in God's name that Holly Holm deserved a rematch. She had all of 0 title defenses, and she got choked out cold. Like, no, you do not deserve a title defense if you've had 0 title defenses, which the two criteria, at least for me, how long have you been champ? If you defended the belt 10 times like Anderson did, you get a rematch even if you get punched into the upper deck. The other one, the classic Machida Shogun, if the fight's so close or the decision so controversial that the fans demand it, then make it a second time. This was neither. I thought the UFC would do it just because they've seemingly been giving a rematch to everybody. But no, I have 0 problem with them giving it to Nunes or letting Miesha Tate choose. I mean, that's, a woman's right to choose. No. I think it's interesting that they gave Miesha the right to choose her opponent, because I don't think champions are always given that, and the UFC's kind of had a testy record as far as relations with Miesha. She didn't get a title shot in forever. But no, I don't think Holly was snubbed at all. Let's move to one of the more heavy MMA subjects of this year. Joao Carvalho, Joe Carvalho, I'm sorry for any mispronunciations, but a young fighter who died fighting in Ireland. Apparently the sport was unregulated, and Ireland now is set to regulate MMA following the death of this fighter, which I'm all for that. The more... apparently this fight still had on-site medical staff, and he was brought to, an emergency room, and he had emergency brain surgery, but the 28-year-old ended up succumbing to his injuries after falling ill 20 minutes after being beaten via TKO in Total Extreme Fighting in Dublin. Apparently Conor McGregor was close to all of this, or writing a pretty heartfelt message up on Facebook. This is really tough. It's a sport where you're gonna induce some brain damage, and in every sport. I mean, I think this year in high school football, like 15 kids died, and that's the reality of contact sports. In contact anything. Car crashes, people die. Football, people die. Soccer, people die. Surfing, people die. I mean, people die doing everything, and contact sports just ratchets that up. So, yeah, you're going to have a lot of people jump to crazy, lengths saying MMA this, MMA that. And shit, I mean... The only two possible answers I think we have here, whether it comes to concussions in football or, MMA, we either choose that as a futuristic society, we stop doing sports like this that can potentially injure the brain, or we accept the risk. Just like we do with interstates, Interstates, we have accepted the risk that X amount of people die driving on interstates, but we accept the trade-off for having, easier travel. I can drive to anywhere in the U.S., and the speed limit will be, 70 or 80, and I can, drive to wherever. I can commute to work and all that, and it's legal. and people die on the interstates every single day, and it's still legal because we accept that trade-off. And I think, I mean, as more morbid as it sounds, you have folks on one end saying the sport should, the sport shouldn't be allowed, and I'm all for the tip of the spear as far as having medical people on staff and all that. And I hate if the way I'm wording this is a little too blunt, but it's a trade-off that we, as a fan of a contact sport, you kind of have to make, and even more so as an athlete. I have a really good friend of mine, Yao, who's been on the show multiple times. He's been on the show dozens of times. Just about a week ago, he and I were on the phone talking for like an hour, and he's worried about going into mixed martial arts, worried about long-term health, brain injuries. He doesn't want to grow old and have a wife and kids and grandkids and not be able to go up and down stairs, or not, be able to talk normally, because fighting left him in a place where he was, limited mentally or physically. It's a crazy trade-off, man. And it's a trade-off that, unless you're fighting really callously and not really taking things in, 99.9% of fighters have run that risk assessment in their head. And, I don't think saying banning it or let's get rid of MMA properly affords these fighters. They've all done the assessment and broken it down, and saying that we should take the sport away kind of takes away, I don't know what, it sort of devalues that very important process that a fighter goes through. And I'm ranting on like crazy now. But yeah, Pat, what did you make of this? And this is unfortunately as brutal as a sport as MMA is. When people die playing soccer, they sort of think of it as a freak thing, but when people die fighting, punching each other in the face, it's going to be looked at more critically than probably any other sport, because the sport's so carnal and brutal.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about it is, like you said, when people hear of a death in soccer or say baseball, they're very shocked. It's looked at as a freak thing. When something like that happens in mixed martial arts, they wonder why it doesn't happen more often. And the thing is, and we were talking about this a little bit, is just that the large organizations, specifically the UFC, with their medical testing, for years, the level that it's been at, I mean, my goodness, they were able to save Thiago Alves from fighting and be able to do a procedure on him. They actually did a preventative brain surgery on him, and he was able to fully recover and actually come back and fight in the UFC to this day, just because of stringent medical screening and regulation. And really, that's what it comes down to. And I think you killed it with the interstate analogy. There's the trade-off that you have to make. You have to accept it. There's the give and the take. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Not in this sense. And all you can do, much like an interstate or driving in your motor vehicle, we're constantly repaving the roads, trying to make sure they're as good as possible, redesigning cars themselves, car safety measures, trying to make everything as safe as possible so that we reduce the risk. We all accept it inherently when we go to get our driver's licenses, no matter who you are in what country. When you get behind the wheel of a 4,000-pound automobile, you have to make certain reconciliations, and you have to realize that you are wielding an object that is capable of killing yourself or other people, and that is the price you pay for your convenience. And with this sport, the chance of serious injury or death is something that just comes along with the nature of fighting for a living, or, that's the cost of entertainment for the masses. But with the proper medical screening, we can at least weed out certain, or do the best that we can to say, okay, there's a person with a pre-existing condition that may be more susceptible to some sort of brain trauma or something like that, or, having weaker, blood vessels or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a physician. That's why they need these people to assess these things, instead of just letting anybody who's willing to fight go in and fight. It's one thing to train in the gym and to be very good in the gym, but then just the full contact fighting. And really the issue as well, speaking of further regulation, is you'll watch in this video, or at least there's a video of the fight that you can see, and the fight probably could have been stopped a little bit earlier by the ref, for sure. There was a point where it's like, okay, I mean, again, this isn't a huge promotion. This isn't for the UFC championship or anything like that. It was in the third round. It probably could have been called. Carvalho, he got up, to his knees after the stoppage, and that was the last I'd seen of the video. But it really makes you wonder, how many of those blows, maybe if it would have been stopped earlier, none of this would have happened. And it makes me wonder, like the UFC heavyweight bout, we had mentioned earlier, Cannonier versus, I forget the gentleman, his opponent. But, when he knocked him out, I said, my goodness, that could have been stopped earlier. He took a gigantic elbow to the face that just cut him wide open when he was basically already out to begin with. Completely unnecessary. And, these things happen. The referee in that fight was lucky that it was just a cut on the forehead that happened in that fight, because, I mean, my goodness. And you know what? I don't want to put it all on the ref, because we just don't know. I don't know that we know that. But you can never go wrong erring on the side of fighter safety. And sometimes I would much rather have a stoppage too early than too late. I'm not saying, again, not a physician. It'll be interesting to see what they say really the cause was. I mean, I'm sure it's just, I don't know. Now I'm rambling on, Jake. It's a heavy subject. But, we need to accept that this is a reality, and we just need to regulate the sport better, educate the officials, get the medical officials and the medical screening so that we can be sure people don't have genetic predispositions to even more danger than the already inherent danger that comes with the sport.
Yeah, it's true, man. And I hope this drives Ireland toward safer regulations and all that, and it really makes you appreciate the really good refs in the sport, like John McCarthy, Herb Dean, refs that really have probably saved a few lives, not just in UFC work, but I feel like they're doing some event every single weekend, and they really are the best out there. I want to shift the spotlight from Ireland over to Asia. Ben Askren going to be fighting tomorrow morning, actually, in ONE FC, and I want to play a clip of an interview he just did about his future in Asia, and maybe potentially coming over to the UFC. This has been on, I believe, ESPN. I think this is MMA Live. I guess they brought that show back. But this is Askren on MMA Live Extra.
You've been complimentary of Bellator's success in recent years. You're the former welterweight champ in that promotion. The UFC back and forth is well documented. You train in the U.S. You just mentioned Johnny Hendricks is on your bucket list. How much interest do you have in fighting again stateside at some point down the road?
I'm really happy with ONE. I just signed a new contract with them to extend my period here. They're treating me really well. They put on huge shows. I mean, a lot of the American fans don't realize it, but every single show over here is sold out. I fought in front of 12 to 15,000 people every show I've done. So, I don't really have any interest in coming back at the time because everything's going so well over here.
Well, certainly you're in the middle of your contract, of multiple fights left on that. But looking down the road, you're 31. What do you think is the likelihood that before you hang up your gloves, you would have UFC wins and fights on your resume at some point?
At this point, I'd say it's fairly unlikely. I just don't see. I don't see it. I mean, even if I were to fight out my contract and want to become a free agent, what the UFC did to me last time, which has been fairly well documented, is so scummy. It's so disgusting what they did that I would have a hard time ever trusting those guys or believing anything they say again.
He's Ben Askren, fights Nikolai Alexakin Friday in Manila. Ben, we appreciate the time. Best of luck on Friday.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
For more news from the world of mixed martial arts, keep it locked right here on ESPN.com/MMA. For Ben Askren, I'm Phil Murphy. Thanks for watching.
And I went ahead and let that play just so you can go check them out. But, yeah, Ben Askren's saying the UFC scummy, saying he'll probably never fight over there. What do you make of those comments?
Well, certainly with a lot of the things that we see the UFC from stirring the pot between he said, she said, between the fighters, the Reebok deal, the video game licensing issues, or just the likeness rights issues in general that they have some of the fighters on. It's not hard to see Ben Askren's point. It's not hard to see why some of these fighters are now going to Bellator. Relatively big name fighters. So, not entirely shocked to hear him say that. I mean, especially like he said, he's getting 12 to 15,000 people in the seats every time he's fighting in venues like Manila. I mean, my goodness. Speaking of big fight destinations, how about Manila? That'll certainly fit the bill. So he's doing a good job over there. They're really cornering the Asian market in MMA right now. ONE FC really is the biggest thing going. Ryzen, I mean, that really doesn't even exist yet. They kind of had one show co-promoted with Bellator on New Year's Eve, but a lot of that is just ramblings at this point. I don't know. I think they're finally putting something together. But ONE FC, they've got that good coalition of promotions going there. So not shocked at all. I mean, hey, Ben is over there doing his thing, getting his money, and especially with the very deep conversation we just had. I mean, you know, why would you go to another promotion and put your health on the line to fight for someone who you may not be in step with morally? You know, you may not want to go to that promotion strictly for the fact, you know, you may want to fight Johnny Hendricks, but you don't want to make a person, you know, or you don't want to make Zuffa money. So, you know, I can see where he's coming from in that respect.
Yeah. You know, the guy makes plenty over with ONE FC. Selfishly, as a fan of MMA, I'd love to see him fight the best of the best, because I really do think he would win the UFC welterweight title. You know, the guy's just dominant, and you know he's gonna fight, I guess, in about 12 hours, or no, sorry, in about 36 hours on Friday morning. Looking forward to that fight. I honestly hope we see more welterweights come over to ONE FC. You know, we have Rory McDonald, maybe a free agent soon. I don't know if he would. You know, if he were to leave the UFC, it seems like his only real options are ONE FC and Bellator. So I don't know what we would see there. But, yeah, you know, Askren, I wouldn't want to deal with the UFC after what they put him through last time either. Moving right along, Frank Mir testing hot after the Mark Hunt fight, and this seems like it might be the same sort of deal as the Yoel thing, where he took a substance that wasn't banned, but it was tainted by the supplier. What is the state of these drug tests now with USADA? We're going to talk about the Lyoto news next, which he backs out of his fight without even failing a test. He just lets USADA know that he took a banned substance, and the fight's off. And honestly, we can combine it into the same topic. You know, Do you believe Frank? Do you believe Lyoto? USADA and the state of these drug tests. Now you have this new, wrinkle in drug tests that the fighter may not have done anything wrong. You can blame the supplier for tainting supplements. What do you make of all this? This is all sort of, to me, it seems like it's getting a lot messier than I thought it would with USADA. And I do like the fact that, we're testing fighters more and more fighters are testing hot. But this supplier tainted my supplements thing. Yeah, maybe once or twice, but now it seems like that's what everyone's claiming. And I don't know how valid that is the more I hear it.
Oh, sure. That's the new. I didn't know it was on the banned substances list, or I mean that's a story as old as time. Ain't nobody buying that. Someone put something in my fucking protein shake in the morning, or really, I sincerely doubt that. That's a little paranoid. I mean, who knows? Maybe there is some sort of conspiracy of some international conspiracy of making sure high profile athletes test positive for dope. I mean, I don't know. I think it's just a little bit much. The best way to avoid popping hot is to just, lay off the supplements maybe, I don't know, get your creatine going. I don't even know if creatine is a banned substance under USADA. I mean, or get a homie that's a chemist, man. Get someone that can compound you those good drugs, man. I mean, that's for real. Get someone on your payroll that isn't going to be bought because they're your dude. That's really what this comes down to. Man, people just slipping these days, and USADA's catching all of them. It's or a good majority of them. We got 2 former champions now in just like a matter of 48, 72 hours, maybe a little more than that, but 2 former champions just getting popped hot. We had Anderson Silva, former champion, popped hot. I mean, they're just coming out of the woodwork, popping hot left and right from, the bottom to the top of the spectrum and the bottom of the top of the rankings. I'm not buying any of these excuses, to be quite honest. I mean, it doesn't matter what sport you're in. It's so fucking old. The excuses for every fucking sport, they're all the same. They're all so old and tired. If you're a professional athlete, you should know better. You should know what's going in your body at all times. Someone tainted my. Get out of here with this. I can't even, Jake. I can't even.
P Money is he is coming in hotter than those drug tests, man. I don't know. It's I feel like, I don't know, man. Will we ever be? Do you think we'll ever be at a point where fighters just stop trying to cheat, taking drugs, doing this, doing that? Because I optimistically would like to think so, but I don't think we ever get there. I think as long as the sport's around, you're gonna have people trying to fool the system one way or another.
Oh, sure. I mean, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, as the old adage goes. But I mean, you can still cheat in the cage. A little cage grab here and there, a little eye poke, feeling out for range. But whether or not you'll ever get people to stop taking these substances, probably not. I mean, I heard, word on the street, some of these motherfuckers be injecting clean piss into their prostate and shit. And that's how they be fooling these drug tests. They're straight injecting foreign piss into their bodies and peeing it out. As long as you have people that are that desperate to cheat, I don't know how you could really combat that. I mean, it seems like they're real prone for the police-style raid, 6 a.m., kicking in the door. Give me your piss. Kind of hard to have that fake piss in the prostate ready to go, especially when you got that good morning piss. You know how that morning piss is. That's urgent. That's all yours. So they're really getting it down, man. Who knows? I think they may be close, but I mean, hell, people are gonna try, sadly.
And now with Lyoto off the card, Lyoto versus Dan Henderson is canceled, and we have just a skeleton of what this card used to be. We were supposed to have Nurmagomedov Ferguson. Instead, we have Khabib fighting this newcomer, Daryl Horcher. Nurmagomedov's like a minus 1,100 favorite. We were supposed to have Rashad Shogun. Instead, Shogun had to back off of the card with, I guess, I don't know what sort of injury, but just about a month ago, replaced by Glover Teixeira. So your top three fights, you had Ferguson, Nurmagomedov, you had Teixeira Evans, you had Evans, Shogun, and Lyoto Hendo, and none of those fights are going to happen now. Rose, Tisha Torres, your co-main event, Glover, Rashad, your main event. Aside from those two fights, what are you looking forward to on the card? Personally, John Dodson, a debut at bantamweight. I think he's going to steamroll Manny Gambarian. Bitch Kohea, I believe, loses to Rocky Pennington. The fight I am really looking forward to seeing, though, Beneil Dariush against Michael Chiesa. Talk about underrated. Both of these guys are young, have very, very bright futures. Man, I really don't know who to pick here. I'll take Chiesa, but it's close. As far as the main card goes, Cub Swanson versus Diaz. I think Swanson notches another W, and Khabib just does whatever he wants to with this kid Horcher. What do you see going down? UFC Tampa.
Well, I'm surprised. Like you said, this card is just taking a huge hit, but somehow they've managed to salvage a pretty solid card out of it all the way around. I mean, Dodson versus Gambarian, that was my pick for the fight of April, and that's kicking off the Fight Pass portion of the prelim card. Solid scrap. Can't wait for that. John Dodson back it up, bantamweight for the first time in some years. Court McGee versus Santiago Ponzinibbio. That should be a solid scrap. I'm looking forward to that. Court McGee, fan favorite, loved him on Tough. Great story. Santiago Ponzinibbio, he's a solid prospect. Got some good skills, nice style. Really liking that one. Betch Kohea, her return since, that's been almost a year, I want to say, since she fought Ronda Rousey. She's taken on Raquel Pennington. Be interesting to see how Betch pops back from that one. And as you mentioned, Dariush versus Chiesa, that's an interesting scrap. Both guys grappling heavy with their skills. Be interesting to see who ends up taking that one. May end up turning into a striking match, as we all know. Sometimes that's just how it works. The strikers end up grappling, and the grapplers end up striking, and everybody ends up dissatisfied. No, I'm just kidding. This should be a good one, though. I'm and of course really Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Daryl Horcher. That's got to be the fight to look out for. Of course, I'm rooting for the Palm Springs guy, Cub Swanson, hometown kid. I'm sure he's going to get the W over old Hackern there. Although Hackern is a solid guy, Cub Swanson has proven over and over again he's able to hang with the best of them, and he should best Hacker Diaz. But really Khabib, as removing the co-main and main event, Khabib is really the fight to watch. Everybody's going to be interested to see how this fight turns out. Over 2 years since he's fought, if I'm not mistaken, he is getting a better fight really for his return. I mean, to be thrown right back into the waters of Tony Ferguson, tall order, especially the way Tony Ferguson's been looking. This is a good chance for Khabib to get back in there, knock off some of the ring rust, get back into the momentum of fighting, get back into trusting his own body, and then get that out of the way, and he'll be able to get back in there, provided if he's able to get the job done against Daryl Horcher, who is undefeated, if I'm not mistaken. If he's able to get the job done there, then he'll be able to move on to those high-profile, the number one contender fights. And who knows, maybe if he wins this fight, you never know how things are going to shake out with the UFC. He could go from his fight with Daryl Horcher right into a title shot after that. So that's certainly one I'm looking out for.
Yeah, bringing us to the main and co-main event, which a few minutes before halftime, your boy Kobe's got 21, Pat. But first we got Thug Rose and Tisha Torres. Vegas sees Thug Rose as a minus 240 favorite. I'm going with the underdog here. I'm going Tisha Torres. You know, we sort of want to talk about fighters that stock has risen a bunch recently against fighters who have, you know, a record of winning fights against tough opponents. Rose, look, very good, but you look at her pro record. Yeah, she notched some wins in the Tough House. She's beaten Angela Hill and Paige Van Zant. Hill, not with the UFC any longer. Van Zant was very overrated when they fought one another. Tisha Torres, you look at her record, she's fought Rose before. She beat her very decidedly a few years back. She also beat Paige. Also a win against Hill, a win against Herrick, a win against Angela Magana. Tisha Torres, I think, is going to be dangerous in this fight, training out of ATT with Lawler, Lombard, a bunch of killers. Black belt in karate, black belt in taekwondo, a blue belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Thug Rose, pretty established herself, also holding black belts in karate and taekwondo, a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, training in Grudge out of Denver. This will be a close fight. I think it'll be closer than their fight a few years ago, but I'm picking Tisha again. I think Tisha Torres is one of the more underrated fighters at strawweight. I think she, we may very well see her fight in 2016 for a title. She's got a lot of skill, and I have her with the upset over Thug Rose. I like both fighters a lot, but I'm picking the Tiny Tornado, Tisha Torres. A lot of T alliteration there, Pat.
Yes, T to the fourth power, as I actually never call it. That was not funny. But, yeah, really, she shouldn't be the underdog. As you pointed out, she has a victory over Rose Namajunas previously. So Namajunas, almost like the Ben Rothwell situation that we had, you know, it's what have you done for me lately? And Rose Namajunas, her stock, really, she's just been looking good. She's been looking very impressive. And she does have a big height and reach over Tisha Torres, and, you know, their first fight was a while ago. I rarely ever pick against somebody that has already beat the person. You know, you've already fought before. You already won. It's how can you pick against that person? For me, it's kind of hard. No matter how good you get, you already have that win over that person. And for some reason, I just feel like Rose is going to be able to get the job done in this one. I feel like she's going to use that height and reach, and be it with the striking, be it with the submissions. I think she's getting into her own now, and I think she is just. I mean, she's brutal. What she did to Paige Van Zant, that was just an excellent fight. Tisha, though, my goodness, she is fantastic everywhere. As you mentioned, she's certainly got the credentials. She's got the striking. She's got great wrestling as well. But I think Rose is a little better with the jiu-jitsu. I think if Tisha tries to take her down, that will just play into Rose's game. And I think on the feet, Rose just has that height and reach. She's just looking good these days. I think she's going to get the job done here versus the Tiny Tornado, Jake.
Going with Thug Rose, the favorite. She's minus 240, like I mentioned, on 5 dimes. Similar odds you got in the main event. Glover Teixeira minus 220 against Rashad Evans. On this one, I am going with the favorite. I am going with Glover Teixeira. Honestly, simply because you look at Rashad Evans' record, and it seems to be in his last 10 fights, there seems to be a formula that works out in every fight. Whoever is the one pushing the action wins. In all of his losses to Ryan Bader, Little Nog, John Jones, he was not pushing the action. He was letting the other fighter be the cage general and sort of lead where it goes. And all of his wins, Chael Sonnen, Dan Henderson, Phil Davis, Tito, Quentin, Thiago Silva, Rashad was the cage general. I think this is going to be a fight where Glover is pushing the action. I think Glover is, throws faster, throws harder, even though the guy's 36, and Rashad is, I guess Rashad's the same age at 36. Neither due to spring chicken here, but Glover, he's looked very good in his last 2 wins against Ovin St. Preux and Pat Cummings. The Pat Cummings fight, a TKO victory in the second round there. So I am going to pick Glover here. I think Glover finishes it. I think he wins a TKO. I think this is maybe the last fight of Rashad Evans' career. And what a career it was. You won the title and then fought for the title again after losing it. Not a lot of fighters can say they've done it. And you were a champion at 205 when the 205 belt was like the thing in the UFC. It went from Chuck to Rampage to Forrest to Rashad to Lyoto to Shogun to Jones. That was sort of the main storyline in the UFC for a while. So it's been a good career for Sugar Rashad Evans, and I think this is maybe the last chapter we see. And I have Glover winning the fight.
I would have to say I have Glover winning this fight as well, Jake. We are on the same page with this main event. I just think, me personally, I've been selling Glover a little bit short in some of his fights, and he's proven me wrong a couple times. He has been beasting lately and beating a few guys I did not think he would beat. And coming into this fight, Rashad Evans has just been inconsistent over the years. I mean, you look back at his fight with Little Nog, and that was just one of the weirdest fights you ever seen. That was them playing patty cake for 15 minutes. It just made little to no sense, and he's had some puzzling performances over the last couple of years. And with that inconsistency, I think Glover Teixeira, he's going to be in there and he's going to be ready to take advantage. He took this fight on relatively short notice, and he's a beast. He's always ready to smash. He's got the heavy hands, and funny you should mention it. Wouldn't it be kind of bittersweet if he was able to get this win for his longtime training partner? I don't know if he would actually be his coach, Chuck Liddell, I meant to say. Just getting all old school up in here, talking about the light heavyweight belt lineage, everything like that. I think that would be an interesting way for things to come full circle with the prodigy of the Iceman beating Rashad Evans. I don't know if he would retire after this fight. I mean, he does seem to have things pretty good over there at the UFC Tonight desk, and I think he's really good in that capacity as well. He's one of the better fighter analysts that the UFC employs, so I certainly would like to see him, and I think he will be sticking with them for some time, regardless of what happens after this fight in that capacity. But I would not be surprised at all if Rashad Evans won. I mean, of course, as you mentioned, the Tough 2 champion at heavyweight, and of course that was back when tough meant something. I mean, that was quite an accomplishment. 205-pound champion, consistently one of the top 3 at the 205-pound division ever since he showed up. Realistically speaking, he's always been one of the best fighters in the UFC. Pound for pound, wrestling, striking, has it all. And would not be surprised if he got the win. But yeah, I just think that this is Glover's time. I think he's going to get the victory.
And I believe that does it for this edition of the MMA Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week it's going to be TMP 167, a very special 420. I don't know if we've ever done a podcast on 420. We have confirmed that Ramses will be calling in for the 420 show. More importantly, we're going to be recapping UFC Tampa. We're going to be previewing UFC 197, that John Jones OSP fight, that Demetrius Johnson Henry Cejudo fight. Might try and line up an interview. Pat, where do we find you?
Well, you find your boy on most social media outlets at Sweet Pappy Jones. That's where you can holler at me. We'll talk about fights. We'll talk about tunes. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Thank you for listening. Jake, thank you for hosting. It's always a pleasure.
Always. Once again, you can follow us on Twitter at The MMA Podcast. Visit TheMMAPodcast.com and click the links at the top to subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next week. And until then, we out.
On TV, I make this shit look easy. Who would have thought I hit you right back? Why you